And welcome to my Photoshop Masterclass, the 10 Photoshop secrets that changed my life. In this webinar, I'm going to go over things like how to create a strong effect, how to realize your vision in minutes, and how to stand out in a sea of artists. So a lot of things I'm going to be covering. So turn off your phone or put it on silence and maybe take a pen and some paper and take some notes. As a note, at the end of this webinar, I'm going to be giving you quite a few files, including the recording of this right now. And I want you to really follow every step. There's going to be a lot of things to cover. And I'm also giving anybody who's watching this webinar, I'm giving you a bonus of a few hours of training to actually be able to do everything that we're going to cover today. All right, so try to be distraction free. If the cat's running around or something, maybe close the door, but pay attention, take some notes, and we'll get right down in. Okay, so got some people in here coming in. Colin from North Carolina, Lisa from Maine, Jamie from Iceland, Pat from Minneapolis, Anita from Florida, Laz from Fort Myers, Florida, Marina from Netherlands, Sigbjorn from Denmark, Copenhagen. I actually grew up in Copenhagen. JP from the south of France. Bonjour, Jean-Pierre, Jean-Paul. Shingo from Japan, Johannes from Berlin, Guten Tag. Wow, people are really flying in. I'm so excited to see you all. I've prepared an awesome presentation for you all, and I can't wait to get started. Let's just give it a couple minutes so everyone can join in. I see Vyash from Singapore, Jackie from Toronto, Mustafa from Germany, Ian from cloudy England, Ralph from Dusseldorf, Janea from Sweden, Yono from Milano. Very exciting. All right, cool. All right, well, welcome everybody. And if you've ever felt like your work isn't standing out online or on social media, or that Photoshop, using Photoshop is taking too long and you aren't getting the results that you want, or you see images from other artists and you have no idea how they're doing it, well, I'm here to help. So, my goal for this masterclass is to teach you how to create things, really doable things. Sometimes you'll learn something and you never really did it, so you made sense when you saw it or when you saw it in action, but you never used it. And I really want you to come home with some new capacity to create amazing artwork. I hope this inspires you and accelerates you towards your goals in becoming, whether it's a photographer or a retoucher, graphic designer, and creating graphic arts. And I really want to help you create art that stands out because I've worked hard to make my art stand out, and I've gone through some difficulties in doing that, and I wanted to share some of the things that really helped me. Okay, and if you do stay till the end, like I said, you're going to get a bonus. There's quite a few tutorials that I'm going to give you, some files for you to play with and learn so that you can apply the things that I'm going to teach you today. And now I realize that there's a lot of people here and there's different levels, some very beginner, some a little more intermediate. And so I'm going to try to cover all. And for those of you who really have never really used Photoshop at all, don't worry, I'm giving you some really basic tutorials. For example, I will show you in one of the parts, I kind of need you to know some basic selections. And if you don't know that, that's okay, because at the end of this, you're going to get a course, essentially a tutorial specifically on that if you don't know how to use it, okay? And some other goodies for you to test on. So some files that you can open and follow the tutorial to learn selections, for example. But I won't cover, this won't be a long masterclass on detailed selections and so on. So if you don't know that, you'll learn it with the bonus. And if you do know, then this will be a lot easier and you can just fly through. All right, and don't miss out after I'm done with the learning process and the 10 Photoshop tips that really changed my life. I will do a live Q&A at the end, so save your questions for the end, and I really want everybody to learn and have their questions answered. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the chat now so we can focus on the presentation. Keep those questions until the end. I will get to you. Okay, so who am I? My name is Kelvin Piemont, and I'm a French designer and photographer. And like I said, I grew up in Copenhagen for about 10 years, and I've been working in Los Angeles, Paris, mostly, and so I live in Los Angeles now. I grew up in Paris and Copenhagen, like I said, and I always dreamt of being an artist. I was studying music with the dreams of becoming a film composer. And I played around with Photoshop when it first came out. Everything I created was pretty terrible, mediocre at best. And I was never short of ideas. I just had no idea how to execute them. So it was impossible to learn back then in the mid-90s when I started. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. At the time when you bought Photoshop, you were given this big book that was written by programmers and coders, and it was how to use Photoshop. It was the manual to Photoshop, and you would learn about, I don't know, Gaussian, how to blur something, and it would get all into the details of what's happening to the pixels and a lot of technical jargon. It was just not, it was not artistically project oriented. It wasn't, let me drive you through with this inspiration and help you create something. It was, here are the 30 methods of blurring something, and here's what happens to the pixels, et cetera, and it wasn't very inspiring, to say the least. But that's all I had, so I actually read those manuals, and I say those because there was a number of versions, and I started actually using Photoshop before layers came out, and right before layers came out, and it was very tricky doing any kind of editing back then. A lot of playing with channels, so I'm not going to get into the technical parts, but anyway, so I read those manuals back to front to back, and I really got to know Photoshop technically. It took me quite some time, and I actually started working in a color house. And what that means is, it doesn't really exist that much anymore, but back then, when you would want to print magazines and so on, you would go through a process of creating film that then you made plates to print with. And in those places, you have to make the colors perfect, and you scan the images, and you do the layout and so on. So I worked there, and I really got technically proficient in Photoshop and the other software that we used at the time. But I remember, wanting to design, going from knowing something technically to designing something or creating an image, creating an effect, a piece of art. My first step was I need to know the tool, and this tool in this case is Photoshop. And so when I first started, it was I'd do something and it looked really corny and unrealistic, and the colors were off, and there's a lot of things I had to learn. Did the manuals, got a little bit of training, and everything changed. I remember one of the first projects that I worked on that I really liked. I was working at this color house, and we were doing the poster for the movie Armageddon, sometime in the late 90s. And I remember working on the skin tones and the colors and everything. And when I saw it printed and I saw it, on the billboards, it was like, wow, like it looks real. Like when you first do your things, you're like, oh, it doesn't look real. And by real, we mean professional. We mean it doesn't look photoshopped. It just looks good. So I remember that was like one of the first times where skin tones were really nice, and obviously this was done for big production companies, so it had to be perfect. And I was working with extremely skilled people in this field, a little more traditional, meaning they used old techniques, and I was kind of more proficient at Photoshop at this point. Anyway, it really inspired me, and like I said, I had a background in film scoring education. And movies have always been a big inspiration for me. So when I worked on a poster, I was like, that was exciting. And that's kind of how I got into it. That's just kind of how I started. All right. So I then went on, skipping a bunch of years, but I went on to working in Paris in some of the biggest agencies, and later on had my own agency for about a decade. And I worked on amazingly prestigious brands like, Nestle and Disney and Perrier and San Pellegrino, and anyway, a lot of Peugeot, for those of you who know the French cars. Some very prestigious brands, and they all have very high standards for advertising and graphics. All right, how does this apply to you? The reason I'm sharing a bit of my story is because I started out where everyone does. I was incredibly passionate about design, full of ideas, but I had no skills. So my journey in design has brought me where I am today, and I'm incredibly passionate about teaching this. And a little bit of background on this: I had my agency in Paris, like I said, and I would get these interns coming out of these really prestigious schools, and they had, they've learned a lot of things, but they almost never knew the tools, and in this case, Photoshop. So having gone through teaching a number of interns that would come through in the agency, I started recording what I was teaching so that I wouldn't have to repeat myself time and time again. And I needed a place to host it, so I used YouTube, and this was in the early days of YouTube, or at least when I discovered it. And they would come, I had a new intern come in, I was like, all right, here's some tutorials you should read, and how to outline, how to make good selections, how to do some decent color correction, here's some basic adjustment tools, etc., some basics. And lo and behold, these tutorials kind of took off. They were destined for my interns, but they were hosted on YouTube and they were public. So 20 million views later, here I am. And it was amazing getting feedback from all over the world of like, this really helped, and some questions, and I'd love to answer. And anyway, so that's how this started. And today I'll be sharing the 10 Photoshop secrets that changed my life. Things that I've had to struggle and claw to figure out. When I started, there was no internet, no YouTube or forums, just a lot of trial and error. And my 10 Photoshop secrets are the things that have made it possible for me to be successful as a designer, and I want to share them with you and save you all the hard work that it took me to figure this out. All right, so the question is it possible to take your ideas and turn them into reality? Whether you want to be a pro or a hobbyist, a lot of people that I've taught, they're doctors and lawyers and whatnot, but they take a nice photo and they want to create something nice. They want to create a Christmas card or a poster or just a beautiful piece of art that you can put on your wall. This webinar is about you, the audience, and I'm sharing my story to show that if you're aiming at a goal, it can be achieved. This goal is easy. I've done it with hundreds, thousands of people. So you need a roadmap and you need the tools, and I'm here to help you. All right. All right, what we'll cover. Number 1, how to stand out in a sea of artists. Number 2, how to speed your workflow and improve the quality of your art. And number 3, how to keep up with Photoshop and stay ahead of the curve. Those are 3 really important things, and we're going to break those down so we can really get to it. All right, so number 1, how to stand out in a sea of artists. When I first started, I worked in a temp agency, actually, and I was actually working on some supermarket packaging items. So I was working actually for Nestle Waters in a big agency in Paris, and when these brands like Nestle Waters, they basically buy real estate on the aisle of the supermarket, and you're competing with big companies like Coca-Cola and so on. So the product itself has to be enticing, and the colors have to be perfect, etc. And I went into through this temp agency. I went to work in this big agency, and I'm working with people who've had 30, 40 years of experience, incredibly talented people. And I was pretty young. I was about 21. I didn't have that 30 years of experience or that incredible talent that they've developed over their careers. And yet here I was working on these prestigious products. So I had to figure out a way to sort of short circuit that 30 years. And not that this replaces that, because a career in any field and 30 years of dedicated interest and learning is going to get you amazing abilities. But at that point, I did have to compete. All right, so like I said, I was hired by this temp agency and doing product design or packaging, and that went pretty well. And then I made myself a decent reputation at the temp agency. So another big company, Lear Burnett, I got hired by Lear Burnett through the agency, and to do a brochure for Disney. Now you can imagine Disney's colors have to be impeccable. It's always very bright, and the artwork is amazing. So I went to work there. I was given 5 weeks to work on this campaign and brochures and billboards and so on. And during that time, I developed a few, you can call them templates, but that's not really the right word. I developed tools. I developed tools that I could use time and again, over and over and over again. And there were things that, almost like tricks to make something like, ooh, like it's a little more dramatic, it's a little more poppy, it's a little more, it stands out more. So I did that. I ended up doing the brochure that I was hired to do in about 5 or 6 days as opposed to 5 weeks. and the creative director at the time didn't want to. He was like, "Well, look, I hired you for 5 weeks. I was paid by the hour, so why don't you take the rest of the time and help me develop some tools that my other designers can use?" So I did. I stayed there for a few extra weeks and I developed some extra tools, and then I spent a couple weeks teaching those more seasoned graphic designers how to use them. And it's kind of funny because 10 years later, when I had my own agency, it was some convention of sorts with ad agencies, and there I see, huddled. I was a very small agency compared to some of these big names, and I saw, all the creative directors of all the big agencies huddled, and I was there with my business partner, and we were kind of, a little on the side, and the creative director of Urban at the time points to me and says, "Kelvin Piedmont." And I'm kind of like, "Oh no, what happened?" And he says, "You created these tools for me 10 years ago, and to this day, I still use them." And my business partner kind of jokingly says, "Any royalties involved?" And anyway, all joking aside, I was very happy that these tools that I also still use at that point and have developed a lot more since, but it was proof that these tools really stood the test of time. And anyway, so that was a little story there. All right, so let's dive in. The secret number one. Secret number one is backgrounds. What does that mean? Almost every piece of art will have a foreground, middle ground, background. If you look at this photo here of this river in a canyon, you'll see there is the sky. You'll have the mountains, and then you have your subject in the foreground, which is the raft or that boat, right? Okay. My secret number one is make the backgrounds more dramatic, and in this case, it's a sky. So you can see the before here, which is what I just showed you, and in here you see the after, where I changed the background. You see how much more dramatic that is? It took me a total of 5 minutes. And again, if you don't know how to outline or select, you'll get a full course on this, a full tutorial, which is about 45 minutes on precise selections. But I used this cloud texture, and I dropped it in. All right, you can kind of see the progression here, and I did a little color tweaking on the water for it to match. And again, you're going to get the PSD to create this, just so you can toy around with it and really see how I did this. Now, if you know how to do selections and you have this cloud texture, just drop it in, and voila, pretty dramatic change. You can see another example of a background change in this photo in London, where again I changed the sky, but you can see the before here and the after here. You see how dramatic that was? I mean, it was an amazing photo to begin with, but it missed that sort of extra edge. And by using one of these backgrounds, in this case clouds again, I can change the whole, how dramatic this photo is. Okay, and as far as not clouds, as far as portraits go, you can see before here and the after here. You see, when you have a subject and you change the background, you can make something much more dramatic, okay? So that's secret number one. Don't shy away from changing the background. It can sometimes really give you that extra edge of wow, okay? Secret number two is use textures. Textures can be used in several ways. They can add, I say they add character to a photo. Something that's a little flat, and you can add character. So you can see it before here, this portrait of this guy. It's pretty decent. It's a little flat. It's a raw file. And then with a little color correction, but mostly with a texture applied, boom, look at that. See how much more dramatic that is? Now, I did do a few little other tips and tricks that I'm going to go over in a second on this particular photo, but I want to show you that adding texture really adds character. It adds a little bit of edge. You can see it on his shirt, on his skin tones, and certainly in the backgrounds. In the background, it almost looks like I'm replacing the background, which was tip number one, but I've also added texture, which adds character, okay? So that's number two. And I can show you, here's another before and another after. And you can see that adding a texture can really bring something to almost any piece of art. And anyway, so you have those two examples. There's so many examples. Texture really helps bring character to a piece of art. All right, secret number 3 is dodge and burn. Dodge and burn, now I have two tutorials, one on how to do it in Photoshop, one on how to do it in Lightroom. You'll get both of those. If you're unfamiliar with doing dodge and burn, you'll get those full tutorials into it. It's so simple. It's really, really simple. But look at this photo. This photo that I showed you the texture on. In the before, it's a little flat, and in the after, I went in there and I accentuated the highlights with the dodge, and I accentuated the shadows with the burn. And there's an important rule in photography or art, or graphic arts, which is you want to complexify the lights. Something that's totally flat is a little bit boring. As soon as you have all kinds of sources of light, it's much more interesting. Okay? So, secret number 3, use dodge and burn. If you don't know how to use it, don't worry, you're getting a full tutorial on it. But I'm trying to give you 10 things that you can do to almost any piece of art that will just boost it, okay? And in this case, how to make things, really stand out, because the first point we're addressing is you need to stand out. Your art needs to stand out, okay? All right. Secret number 4 is use photo filters. Now, this is particularly applicable for composites. And by composites, when you're mixing different elements in a photo, different layers, you want them to be together. You don't want it to feel like, ooh, I can totally tell this was shot in one photo and this was another one. And you're looking at it. Now, if you look right here in the screen share, click on, adjustment layers and go to photo filters. The default one is a warming one. If you click here, you can see that you have a few other selections. But what it does is it kind of gives the whole composite or piece of art some kind of unity, some kind of harmony in that color, all right? Marries it together. All right, so that's secret number 4. I use this all the time. And sometimes not even in composites. I'm like, it needs a little more style, and a photo filter will really help you do that. Okay, and secret number 5. This is something I use really on everything. And it starts with Adobe Camera Raw. If you're not familiar with that, it's a filter that you can get in the filters menu. And it has a lot of tools. Go ahead and play with it. I have 3, 4, 5 tutorials that almost every one of my tutorials actually covers Adobe Camera Raw. It is essentially the same thing that you use in Lightroom. So if you're familiar with Lightroom, you have it in Photoshop. If you're familiar with it, my tip is just lower the highlights a little bit, open up the shadows a little bit, add a little bit of clarity, and more importantly, and this is really important for composites, add a little bit of split toning, okay? Split toning is basically you're saying, I want my highlights to be given this color, and I want my shadows to be given this color. And in many cases, you want your shadows to be a little cold and your highlights to be a little warm, because it gives you that sense of depth. All right. The eye is always attracted to the lightest part of the image, and so if you have your subject and your background's a little dark, if you put your background a little blue, let's say, and then the subject a little warm, so a little bit of yellow, it'll give you that depth that really helps. Okay. So use Camera Raw, do a little tweaking, play around with it. You'll see it's one of the most simple tools you can use, much easier than most of the other tools in Photoshop. And go to the tab Split Toning and play around it. Go easy on it because it can go very strong, very, very fast. Okay, good. So you might think you can't use these tools, that they're too complicated, or you just don't need them. The truth is, there's so many ways to use tools like this. Your work will be more unique and will stand out, and you'll feel more inspired and creative while editing. Because they're simple to use, and granted, if you haven't used any of these tools right now, it may seem a little overwhelming. Do it once, 2, 3 times, and you'll see that they're really simple. So go ahead and do it. And I've always noticed that when you can achieve your vision with good tools, so it doesn't take you that long, it's more inspiring. If you're working on a piece of art for 10, 20, 30 hours and you're not getting what you want, your inspiration kind of drops over time. So keep your inspiration strong and use the right tools so that you can do it faster and get a better result. Okay? All right. The next part of this is, and it goes with what I just said, which is realize your vision in minutes. Okay? I'm not saying that every piece of art is going to take you a couple of minutes. If you're going to go out and shoot a subject and a background and whatnot, it'll take time to set up and so on. But when you're in post-processing, when you're retouching, when you're editing in Photoshop, it shouldn't take you that long. It doesn't take that long. Okay, selections are so fast today. Back when I started, I had to use, the pen tool to do everything, and everything was hard edges, and it was much more complicated. We didn't have quick masks and quick selections and so on. Again, if you're unfamiliar with selections and quick selections and so on, you're going to get a full tutorial on this, and you'll understand that it's not that complicated. Okay. All right. So back to when I started my agency, which was kind of a bold move in Paris because starting a company there is not that easy. Taxes and laws and so on are a little harder. So anyway, I made this decision to do it, and I had to have competitive pricing as any startup business, 2002 or 3 or something like that. And at the time, I think I was charging about 35 euros per hour. So if I was making a 40-page brochure, and let's say it was going to take me, it's going to take me about 100 hours, so I'd give, my quotes. And that's how I started, like most graphic designers. That's how I started. Now, so let's say a brochure was 5,000 euros or $5,000. I wanted to find ways to do it faster so that while still keeping competitive pricing, I can provide more service and make a better living. So I got really busy and started creating more tools. So I got the how to stand out. I did that, and I had a pretty good reputation in several industries in Paris for, Kelvin does stuff that's really pops and the colors are really strong, and anyway, I had some kind of reputation anyway. Now I needed to focus on, I couldn't spend 100 to 300 hours on something, and my quality never wavered, but I needed to speed up. So I developed a bunch of tools, presets and profiles and brushes, that really streamlined my whole process. And suddenly I was working 10 times faster, which meant 10 times more income. And that really changed my life. Now, whether you're doing this professionally or not, like I said, being able to create your art quickly keeps your motivation and your inspiration high. And that's really important. So whether you're doing this professionally and making a living of it, in which case it's extremely important, or you're just, hobbyist and an artist, it's important to be able to realize your vision quickly because, like I said, you want to keep that inspiration strong, okay? Okay, good. So let's dive in. The first thing I developed was basically Lightroom or Photoshop presets. And what these are basically settings in Adobe Camera Raw or in Lightroom, which is essentially the same thing. So that I would load a photo and it would automatically, do a bunch of adjustments. So I'd go ahead and be like, oh, here's a cool subject from a studio shot that I took, and then I would change all the settings and really take the time. This could take me hours, make the white point exactly so, etc. And some split toning, some gradients, some highlights, etc. And then I'd save those. And over the course of my 20+ year career, I saved these, and the ones that I kept reusing as incredibly strong starting points, I've saved, and I've made my own little collection. And you can actually see a before here, and it's a raw, so it's a little desaturated, but then the after here, you see how strong that is? And yes, I might have to tweak it a little bit. Yes, my white point may be off on this particular shoot and so on, but that takes a second. A lot of the other settings are just there, and I can go ahead and say, maybe my exposure is a little too high on this one, maybe my clarity is a little too low or too high, etc. So I created a bunch of these presets, and you can see the before here and the after here. So it's very dramatic, as you can tell. And I also created a bunch of brush presets, so local adjustment presets. So instead of applying it to the whole image, you take a photo, maybe you use one of these first presets, you're like, okay, this is good, but my subject, the eyes need to be brightened up, the teeth need to be slightly whitened, I want the background to be a little blurrier, for example, to like emulate a shallow depth of field. So I created a bunch of settings or presets for my local adjustments. And anyway, so I use these all the time, and over these many years, I throw away all the ones that just never get used and narrowed it down into a collection of very strong, sometimes a little too strong, you need to tone it down a little bit. But another thing that's interesting about these presets is sometimes I'm doing a composite. I'm not talking about a raw file here. I'm done with the design, and I'm like, it needs that extra little something. And I'll just go through my presets, and it'll change, and it'll give me either ideas or, ooh, this direction would be nice. I didn't think of making the background slightly greener or magenta or something like that. So really interesting. Okay, the next part in speeding up your workflow is use color profiles. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a transformative, without getting too technical, it's changing the colors it's changing the colors, let's just put it that way, okay? You can look up what a color profile or a LUT, which is a lookup table, what it does technically, but honestly, it's not that interesting unless you want to create or dive into it like I did. It's a little technical, but to keep it simple, I created a bunch of LUTs or profiles that you can use both in Photoshop and Lightroom, and they're very transformative. Whereas presets, they kind of lighten it, they darken it, they add certain character. These ones are quite transformative, where you can have, red poppies, they're suddenly green or yellow, or they're pretty transformative. Not all of them are crazy. Some of them, they just kind of make things pop more. But you can see before here and an after here. See, that's quite dramatic. And it's not the same as a Camera Raw or Lightroom preset. A little different. And you can see another before here and an after here. Okay? All right. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is use Photoshop brushes. Okay? And you can see Photoshop brushes, you double click on a file and you open up your brushes and you have all these presets. And I'm not saying that it's going to handle everything for you. This is not going to fix every piece of art, but sometimes it just gives you that extra piece of wow. And it took one click. You can see this before here, and I select my starry night background. It's basically the Milky Way. I made a brush out of this a few years ago, and one click, boom. What was a nice photo, do a little bit more adjustments, and using Camera Raw, and use all the tips that I've said, that we've covered today, but one click and suddenly it's magical. It went from nice to magical to dramatic, all right? You can see another before here, and this is beautiful, gas station, and I want to make it look wet. So I have a bunch of Photoshop brushes, for example, that I've made that, do rain and splashes, and here's the after. Look at that. It's amazing. It was nice to begin with, and granted, this does use, a little bit of, it's not just Photoshop brushes. I'm using other techniques that we've covered earlier today, in Camera Raw and so on. So Photoshop brushes, don't shy away from using them, even if it's just, scroll through them, look what you got, and they're kind of one-click wonders. All right, so tip number 8 is use Photoshop brushes. Don't shy away from them. They can be really, really useful. All right, tip number 9, and this is for you more experienced Photoshoppers. You're going to think this is obvious. For you people starting out, this is very useful. You have a thing called blending modes. When you put an image, especially in textures, for example, when I put this texture that we covered earlier, and I put it on top, there's a few blending modes that you should try on a regular basis, okay? I use soft light and hard light a lot, okay? It blends really nicely. You see this texture? I said use textures, and I should have probably said use textures and blending modes, but blending modes are not exclusive for textures. When you do maybe a ray of light, or you're creating shadows, use blending modes. There's 5 blending modes really that I think you should start with. The first is screen, which is anything that's light oriented. You're trying to light something on, add some lights to something, whether you're dodging or something, use screen mode. And use multiply. for shadows, okay? Because in multiply mode, basically anything that's dark appears and everything that's light is transparent, which is the opposite of screen, which is anything that's dark is transparent, everything that's light is opaque, okay? So just try it out. If you have some interesting texture, try in screen mode, try multiply mode, and you'll understand how that works. And the third one is use overlay mode. Sometimes you get a pretty interesting result with that. And overlay basically is it's anything that's around the 50% gray area that becomes transparent. So anything that's very light is appearing, and everything that's very dark appears. Okay. All right, and then use soft lights and hard light. In the texture example that I used both, I think, soft light for the skin tones and hard light for the background. Very useful, okay? Good, so that was tip number 9. All right, now, you might be thinking you don't want to use these presets, or that you're happy with the results you're getting, or you've been using the same workflow for a while, you don't really want to change it. The truth is, time equals creativity, okay? That's very important. If you can create better art in less time, it's a winning formula. It's important to keep tweaking your workflow, and you'll unlock brand new ideas and tricks of your own that can only have a positive effect on your work and your capacity for creating. This has been really true for me for many years. If something takes me too long or it feels too arduous, you kind of drop it. How many of you have art that you're still working on that you never finished? You kind of got halfway through, or not even, or maybe a little more, and it just wasn't going where you wanted, and you're like, well, I don't really like it anyway. If you have tools that can get you there quickly, you have that drive that when you first shot it, or you first created that art, you still have it. So these are really important, okay? And okay, tip number 10, and this is probably the most important one, and that is with regards to keeping up with Photoshop and keeping up with industry standards, okay? Now, like I said, I started learning Photoshop in the 90s, and you know, the manuals were the only way that I could learn. We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have, you know, forums, we didn't have webinars like today, and it wasn't really artistically inspired. Now there's a wealth of information on YouTube and in many other places. So many times I'll see something and I'm like, God, how did they do that? And yet I know almost every tool. I mean, there's a lot to keep up with, but I know so much in Photoshop, and yet I will, it happens. I'm like, how did they do that? So the secret is very simple, and you maybe have heard this before. Spend 10 minutes a day and learn something. Everybody's got 10 minutes, okay? Whether your schedule is really packed and you're struggling, you have 10 minutes. And it only takes 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes, find something you don't know how to do, go on YouTube. If you don't know where to start, you can start with my YouTube channel. I have a few episodes in there that you might learn from, how to do light rays, and you know, how to create reflective surfaces and things like that. Some more simple, like selections, like we talked about earlier, or making colors pop, or changing backgrounds, or making more dramatic lighting, and so on. So there's always something to be learned, okay? Now, it might take you more than 10 minutes to learn something, but at least spend 10 minutes. At least spend 10 minutes a day, okay? And I do it myself. I've been doing this for a long time. I've taught thousands and thousands of people, many people on basics in Photoshop, and some very advanced, and I still, every day I go on there, there's such a wealth of information on YouTube and sometimes in other sites. Just Google it, you know, how to, whatever you want to do. I remember I saw the dispersion effect a few years ago, which is how things explode, and I was like, oh, I want to know how to do that. That's cool. Like, I thought of a few different ways of how to do it, but I wanted to know how he did it. And I think I found like 3 or 4 different tutorials with 3 or 4 different methods of doing it, equally all interesting. And suddenly I'm like, I have this in my toolbox, and I'm creating an ad for something, and boom, there's a strong effect. So spend 10 minutes a day. It's really, really important. And you can start with these tutorials that I'm giving you today as that free bonus. It's a good place to start, a good as place as any. So you might be thinking you're happy with things that you know now, you don't want to spend a lot of time, or you don't want to copy someone else's work. The truth is, you're an artist and you need to know the techniques, and everybody's kind of inspired on someone. There's an evolution that happens. What we're doing today is definitely inspired of what's been done in the past, and what we create today will inspire future artists. So don't worry about that, really. It's learn how to do it to your own art, or do it to someone else's art. Doesn't matter, you'll learn. And then when it comes to you creating your piece of art and you know how to use that technique, it's so valuable. Okay, good. So, could you use what you've learned? If you could create an effect, realize your vision in minutes, stand out from an increasing number of artists, would your artwork be better? Well, I certainly hope so. Let me ask you a question. Are you enjoying this masterclass so far? We have covered a lot. I wanted to pack as much as possible into this masterclass so you can start creating right away. Don't worry though, we will be doing a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions, I am here, okay? All right, having covered all of that, and granted you still, for those of you who don't know how to outline and so on, you still have a little bit of learning to do, who wants to take things to the next level? I'd like to introduce you to the Kelvin Designs Tools, Presets, and Add-ons Complete Pack. What this is 2,500 tools that I've created over the last 20 years, and whether it's textures, backgrounds, presets, brush presets, Photoshop brushes, this is, I use these tools all the time, every single day. This is how I'm able to create not only the art that stands out, but do it in a fraction of the time that it takes other people to do it. Here's what you're going to get. My full collection of Photoshop and Lightroom presets. Everything you need to create incredible edits is included in this preset bundle. With 14 packs containing over 1,600 of my favorite presets, editing has never been so easy. With just a few clicks, you'll be able to transform an ordinary or flat photo into an incredibly dramatic and unique masterpiece. I've covered every area of photography in this bundle, from landscapes to portraits, studio shots to weddings. You'll find the perfect preset to inject creativity into your workflow and get the final results faster. It also includes my full collection of Photoshop brushes, all 6 packs, including so many brushes for so many various situations. It's pretty amazing. As you've seen, these are incredible tools and are a huge time-saving tool. You'll always have the right tool for the right job with these. My signature Photoshop brush collection contains 3 packs of my most powerful editing tools and 3 from my buddy Rickard, whom we created together for lights and light leaks and bouquets, which are also amazing. I really, really love these. I've also included my full signature textures collection, all 7 packs of my custom-made textures, totaling almost 200 high-resolution editing tools. These textures will allow you to quickly and easily enhance your images. Add the feel of wild rusted metal, simple paper grain, abstract patterns, and much more with just a few clicks. Whether you need a heavy-handed fix or a light touch of texture to spice up an already beautiful image, you will find what you need to work quickly and stay creative in this bundle. Also included in this bundle is my background collection. 90 high-resolution background images that you can use to quickly transform a kind of boring image into something pretty amazing. You'll get 30 sky backgrounds that I've very carefully curated. These will make it possible to take an overexposed or empty sky and add something pretty interesting. Add a dramatic clouds or weather, and it suddenly completely transform your image in a few clicks. Additionally, you'll receive 60 depth of field backgrounds that are used mostly for portraits and in some cases for subjects that are a little more close. And these backgrounds are really cool. I use these for subjects, objects like lampposts and ads like that, or just portraits. It really transforms almost any portrait, specifically studio shots, from a kind of boring to something kind of pretty amazing. In the bundle, I've also thrown in my full Lightroom brush presets collection, my 4 most advanced packs of Lightroom brush presets that include landscape, portraits, lights, and dodge and burn. This bundle includes over 60 brushes that you'll be able to drastically elevate your editing your speed, and the quality. Using these brushes, you'll be able to create professional quality portraits, create dramatic lights in your images, add depth and texture to a dull image, dodge and burn any photo at an advanced level, and much, much more. Lightroom brush presets are a quick and powerful way to make specific adjustments to your photos, and I use them all the time. They're really, really useful. Also included is my full collection of Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw profiles. It's a collection of 4 packs. This will give you access to over 60 unique color palettes and will transform the way you approach your editing. It's a really, really inspiring tool. I use this all the time. Within the 4 packs, you'll find profiles specifically designed for every type of image. Outdoor to help create amazing landscapes, people for mastering portrait coloration, cityscape to bring new life to your street photography, and glow, which will help you control color and depth of light within your images. If you haven't worked with profiles before, you've really been missing out. They are a non-destructive way to transform the colors in your image. All right, you might be asking yourself, who is this for? Honestly, it's for both beginners and seasoned professionals alike, because being myself a professional and creating ads all the time, I use these all the time. And if you are a beginner, they're very inspiring. They're very inspiring tools. You have backgrounds, you have brushes and textures, and very inspiring. So, and they're not that hard to use. So it's really for both beginners and advanced users. All right, well, you might be thinking you don't need these tools, you don't have time to learn to use them, and you like your current workflow. The truth is, if you had every single tool you need, wouldn't that be helpful? Rather than struggling to find something to solve a problem and buying lots of individual products, if you started using these tools once a week, or one new thing a week, or one a day, your editing will improve massively. As I mentioned, keeping up with the times and working quickly is the only way to stay current and create competitive artwork. These are the tools that will help you achieve this. All right, here's what you're going to get. The Kelvin Designs Tools, Presets, and Add-on Complete Pack, which has about 2,500 professional editing tools, which has a total value of $4,386 when purchased individually, as I've created these individually over the many years. You'll also get access to the Kelvin Designs Facebook Academy, which I usually charge $199 for. And basically it's a closed group where people can submit their artwork and have questions, and I help them through and guide them, okay? There's a place full of artists and designers to get together, ask questions, critique each other's work, and share inspiration. As they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So join a community of like-minded artists, all on the same path, so you can get opinions from people you trust. Here's everything you're going to get. My Lightroom presets, my Photoshop presets, my Photoshop brushes, my Lightroom brush presets, my signature texture collection, my Lightroom profiles that also work in Camera Raw, my backgrounds collection, and the Kelvin Designs Facebook Academy, which is a total value of $4,386. Obviously, I'm not going to charge you, $4,000 something. You're here for the masterclass, so I know you're serious about improving your art. But if all it did was give you the exact tools you need for any edit and help you create faster and get professional results, would it be worth it to you? So, my complete tools bundle, which I usually individually sell for $4,000 something, I'm going to put it on sale today for $199. It's kind of crazy, and for all of you who've purchased individual packs in the past, I really, over the years, I've stripped away everything and everything that wasn't useful for a long time, and I've made this master bundle, and it has everything. I want to make it available to as many people as possible, and $4,000 for all these tools was just too much. So I know it's drastic, and I just want to make it available for everyone. So, and if you do get this complete pack in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to throw in one of my most popular courses. Tens of thousands of people have done this course, my Photoshop 101 course. This is an in-depth, almost 4-hour course. I'll take you through everything you need to know, from the basics of using layers to more advanced things like gradient maps, masks, and much more. This course is project-based and you'll receive all the PSD files so that you can follow along as I'm teaching and really sharpen your skill and start using Photoshop like a pro. So, my complete pack, which is $4,000 something, plus my Facebook Academy, which is about $200, plus my Photoshop 101, which I usually sell for $97, has a total value of about $4,500. And get all of this $199 today, and really sharpen your skill. Get better technique, get better tools, and make a difference in your art. Okay, so you can click on the offer right here on the right-hand side, and you'll be taken to the landing page, or go to kelvindesigns.com/CP, and it'll take you to that offer. Remember, this is a limited time offer just for people attending live today. And don't forget that Photoshop 101 will only be included for the next 15 minutes. Okay, I just wanted to give a little bonus to the people that are a little serious about this. So there you go. You'll receive almost 2,500 creative tools to 10x your editing speed, and certainly 10x my speed, and create truly unique and professional work and stay creative. You're going to love everything included. I've worked tirelessly to create a one-stop package that all Photoshop users need to create incredible artwork. Okay, let's jump in and do the Q&A. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. All right, here we go. If I use these tools, will they look the same as everyone else's? From David. The answer is each tool is a single variable. Think of the orchestra. Even a full orchestra, 64-piece orchestra, the violins and cellos and all that. But the number of symphonies and music that you've created from those tools, from these instruments, is almost infinite. So yes, you can have a texture, and I've been using some of the same textures for 20 years, and the pieces of art don't look the same because they're applied differently, they're used differently. And even if I did apply them separately, or sorry, the same way, it looks different. It's a different piece of art, okay? So, okay, do you use automations? From Lisa. Honestly, it's helpful for big projects to smooth the workflow, but honestly, I don't really use it for day-to-day editing. I like to do individual corrections. Okay, next question. Should I watermark my images when sharing online? From Colin. I would say I personally don't. I did actually a couple years ago. I created a course on how to create a photographer logo, in some cases like a signature. That is my preferred method of watermarking, so it is there. I don't like having a big distraction in front for fear of having my art stolen. That being said, you know, it's your art, so do what you will with it, but I prefer the little signature. Okay, now remember that the Photoshop 101 course is only included in the complete pack if you buy before the end of this masterclass. So, all right, other questions here. What makes your editing tools better than all the other ones online? By Maz. Well, honestly, the internet is full of options. I've refined these tools over the last 20 years and produced a huge body of work with them. I still do daily, and tools are only as good as they are workable. I can assure you that these are workable. I use them all the time. All right, can I still share or sell my images if I use these things? By Patel. Yes, please do. Everything is royalty free, and in fact, I love seeing everyone's images. So please tag me at kelvin.designs on Instagram. I would love to see your work. The license for these are you can't sell these actual tools, but you can absolutely use this in work that you're selling. It would make me so happy if you do. All right, next question. You covered so much I can barely keep up. Will a replay be available, and what are the free bonuses? By Steven. So definitely, in fact, once I finish up, I'm going to put this video together, record it, and send it to you. It might take me a couple hours. And with all the instructions and tools that you need to follow along. If you can't use this, it's a total waste. And you can use this, and it'll be very useful for you. You'll also receive by email in the next 2 hours all the files I worked on today. and different tools I use so you can practice at least some of this, okay? Whether you get my bundle or not, I just want you to at least have one example of something you can use, okay? And good. All right. I see a couple of questions having difficulty with the link. If you have any problems, email support@Kelvin Designs. That's SUPPORT at KELVINDESIGNS.com. I want to make sure that everyone who is with me here today receives everything they need to get started, okay? All right. Somebody says, is it a physical product? Like, will I get CDs or a hard drive from Garth? Everything will be delivered as a download through your account on kelvindesigns.com. Your library will always be available, so if you switch systems or something, if you lose the files, you can re-download them, everything. So you don't get a CD. I don't even have a CD in my computer, or CD drive rather, but you can download them, and you don't have to download everything if you're interested in particular parts of it for now. It's a really nice layout, so downloading is pretty simple. All right, Lauren here says, I work mostly in Lightroom. Will this still be useful to me? Absolutely. Most of the products work in Lightroom and Photoshop, and I use both all the time. So yes, answer is yes. I'm 19 years old and really want to start a career in design. Any advice? By Jim. Well, my advice is spend as much time as possible learning. I have a YouTube channel with loads of tutorials, so you can start it there if you want. I also have some courses available, so start thinking about creating a portfolio, even if they're just fake ads. I did that at one point, and I wanted to do a Heineken ad, or I wanted to do an ad for a car, and so create a couple of really cool images, and something that I did that really worked is signing up to a temp agency. I also liked it because I got to test different workspaces. So if you're, if you're starting out, Jim, 19-year-old Jim, great place to start, temp agencies, put a little portfolio together, and I'm sure you'll do great. Okay, Johannes, do I need a website, or is Instagram okay for promoting my work? So Instagram is obviously very easy and great. I personally recommend using Squarespace as a portfolio site. They're so easy to use, very inexpensive, and you'll see they're great. So I recommend that. And narrow down. Don't do a huge portfolio. It's better to have 3-4 great images as opposed to 15-20 not so great. Somebody will remember you more if you had 3 images that were amazing than if you had 10 that had, 3 of those were good or amazing and 7 that were not so good. So keep it simple and just keep your best work. Okay, I know it's hard to weed out. You're like, yeah, but I did this thing and it's kind of good. Just pick your best work, and it takes it's a process to do it. Trust me, I've done it. Okay, and Jamie, I struggle with masking properly. Do you have a better method or best method? Yes. Actually, I have a full course called the Masking Extraction Masterclass where I go through many different methods of masking. If you have no idea, I do have a free tutorial on YouTube that shows you how to do some selections. If you're very serious and you want to get very expert at it, I have a full course that is actually I'm very proud of. Okay, cool. Well, I think that covers all the questions. I really enjoyed being with you today. It was such a privilege, and I know I covered a lot, so be patient. If you didn't catch everything, just wait a couple hours. I'm going to put this together. You'll receive an email, and I want to give you the files. I want to so that you can test it yourself, and some of these basic tutorials and selections and so on, so you can actually put this to use, and a replay of this masterclass, so you can go back and see the things that we covered. Okay. I really hope you enjoy working with all these tools. I certainly do. It's really changed my life. And I would love if you tagged me in your work, on Instagram at kelvin.designs. I can't wait to see that. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a true privilege to teach you, and I hope you've learned at least a few things, if not a lot. All right. Bye-bye.